Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto-Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Southern 500 here on Running Hot. Last weekend's race at Daytona was won by Chris Buescher. Buescher grabbing his third win of the year. I don't think anybody was expecting to say that coming into the season. Buescher was pushed to the win by teammate RFK Racing and co-owner Brad Keselowski. While Eric Almirola, in a must-win situation, he had to win to get his way into the playoffs, only able to come home in third place, thus bumping him out, keeping him out of the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series season playoffs. So, Stevie, twofold question. One, what did you think of the race? And two, let's talk playoffs. What do you got there? So tell me what you think about the race first.
Racing was kind of wild, right? There was a lot of passing. There was a lot of pushing. It was everything we kind of expected it was going to be. There was a lot of chaos. There wasn't really necessarily the big one, but the racing was great. So do we always need a big one? I don't think so. Good for Chris Buescher and Brad Keselowski. Brad committed to pushing his car. That's as much of a Brad win as a Buescher win. Let's be honest. Brad owns a good majority of the team now, so it's a positive bump for Brad to get 5 more points for Buescher for the playoff points as well, because Buescher's definitely in a better position than Brad is to make a Final Four run as far as the playoffs is concerned anyway. So, really good racing. It was really cool to see Almirola up there mixing it up. Briscoe was up there a lot of the day as well, mixing it up. Really happy that Ryan Preece is okay. I've seen a lot of wrecks. I've been watching NASCAR for a very long time, and I have never seen a car generate that much speed when it started flipping. It was wild. It looked like a video game. So glad that Ryan Preece is okay. And I talked about this on the morning grind this week, but Ryan Blaney should definitely be thankful because that's the same type of wreck that killed Dale Earnhardt. And had Dale Earnhardt not got killed, tragedy, don't get me wrong, but the safety that has come from Dale Earnhardt's wreck has saved lives. And Ryan Blaney should be very thankful because he hit the wall at 175 miles an hour and he hit it hard. And he got out of the car and walked away. And Dale Earnhardt, unfortunately, was not able to do that. So the safety walls, the car itself, just kind of goes to where
everything.
Yeah, it just kind of goes to where we are as NASCAR as a whole, safety-wise. Ryan Blaney's hit was, I think, worse than Ryan Preece's hit. And I think everyone's talking about Ryan Preece's hit because they don't want to talk about Ryan Blaney's hit.
Yeah, I agree with you there. You look at the flex in that safer barrier. That thing gave so much, as it's supposed to. That's exactly what it was designed to do for these high-speed impacts. Add in the Hans device, the better seats, the better roll bars and all sorts of stuff, the way the car is meant to crumple and absorb the energy. All of the safety innovations really helped Ryan Blaney there for him to walk away uninjured. He didn't just, walk away with his life. He walked away uninjured, which is amazing. So let's also not take for granted the safety, because someday something's going to happen and it's not going to be the best. But in this situation, it certainly was. It's auto racing. When you're going at super high speeds, things are possible to happen, but very thankful for all the safety innovations we have. But do want to move on to the playoff picture. 16 drivers in the playoffs. Bubba Wallace did secure the last spot by having Chris Buescher win, who already had won. It didn't allow a new winner to bump Bubba Wallace out of the playoffs. So the 16-car field is set. Stevie, maybe just some quick thoughts if you want to give who maybe your first 4 out are, and maybe a championship prediction or something like that. Whatever you want. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad that Bubba got in. I feel like he definitely deserves it. They've had a really good season. They had a couple bad races, but outside of that, they've had a really consistent season. They've had multiple chances to win races this year. I actually have Bubba going into the round of 12. I was talking to you pre-show and I was debating, and I really think that Bubba has a good chance. Some intermediate tracks, 2311 should be really strong on all 3 of these tracks, and he was strong at Darlington earlier this year. So My first 4 out right now are Stenhouse, McDowell, Reddick, and Keselowski. And these are actually 3 really good tracks for Stenhouse. I wouldn't be shocked. I'm just kind of playing the odds.
Yeah.
You were talking about it. I'll let you give your thoughts, but your driver out would be Stenhouse in for me. Yeah, I mean, overall, I think the playoffs are going to be fantastic. I think the biggest thing to take away on the betting side of things from playoffs is like you have these 2-car teams like RCR where Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon, they're going to fully focus now on Kyle Busch. You're going to have 2 teams fully focused on Kyle Busch. He's going to have great equipment. He's going to have everything that he needs until he's knocked out. The other thing to kind of think about is now some cars can play tests, right? We saw this last year with Roush Fenway Keselowski. I talked about it last year. I talked to some of the guys last year. I think it was at Darlington, actually, where they said that they were going into full test mode. So I think depending on the teams, depending on the drivers, like a Todd Gillen can test for McDowell, right? Like that is something Austin Dillon can test for Kyle Busch and test for next year. So the one difference is like Chase Elliott can't test yet, but Alex Bowman can. Chase Elliott's still in the owners championship points. So I think we're going to see like the edge is more of like who potentially is testing and like who's getting the full focus here.
Yeah, well, even then in testing, last year RFK was in testing mode. They hit it at some tracks, namely like Homestead, for example, Bristol. So they were able to absolutely nail it at some of these tracks where they were testing. And what that means is going into testing mode doesn't mean you're going to be worse. It just means your variance is bigger. It means you might hit on something, or it means you could absolutely whiff and miss. So your variance becomes wider if you are in testing mode. So to tag off of your first 4 getting eliminated, we're actually pretty similar. So I have Michael McDowell getting eliminated pretty easily. And then I have Joey Logano getting eliminated. So I think this is not a great sequence of tracks for Logano. He has not had a good Bristol finish since the first Bristol race of 2019. They've struggled at intermediates this year at 1.5 mile, the Vegas, Kansas, Texas, Charlotte style tracks. Joey Logano's really struggled for speed in the mid-teens in flags at speed at these types of tracks. So that hurts him for Kansas. And then Darlington, he wasn't very good earlier this year. I know he was up there late in the race when he had that wreck with Martin Truex Jr., but that wasn't because he was fast. It just he kind of found himself up there at the front late in the race. But he was down in the bottom half of the teens in flags as well for Darlington the first race. So I got Joey Logano second out. I really like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Great set of tracks for him, but I do have him third out and just barely missing out in a coin flip for me versus a couple other drivers. I'm going to say Bubba Wallace just barely misses the cut, but I really like him, and I do think he has a very strong chance of getting in. So those are my first 4 out for the playoffs. But we need to talk a little bit of Darlington. So Darlington is a little over 1 1/3 mile egg-shaped oval. It's got some steep banking in the corners, 23 and 25 degrees banking in the corners. Old surface, meaning lots of tire wear. So just a classic Southern 500 Darlington race. Very excited for it. Stevie, what kind of racing can we expect at Darlington?
Fantastic racing. I mean, any kind of car, any kind of package we've taken to Darlington, we've had good racing here for years. And it was a track that was kind of like falling off about 8-9 years ago because of when they had it. And then like they brought back like this like Southern 500 classic, like old paint schemes type of race. And like because of how old the surface has gotten at Darlington, the racing just has been phenomenal. I mean, anytime a caution comes out, you're taking 4. I mean, it could be 15 laps into a run because it's 2, 3, 4 seconds sometimes between the start of and the end of run, what you're seeing speed wise. So the racing is typically phenomenal. Comparing it to somewhere, I mean, it's tough because, you look at Homestead, it's 1.5. It's very steep around. You can comp it to Homestead. We haven't been to Homestead yet this season, so it's tough to kind of comp it there. You can kind of comp it to Auto Club. Auto Club is a 2 mile lay the hammer down track where you're using a lot more and trying to ease into the corners at Darlington. So, I mean, those are the 2 like really high wear tracks. We're seeing Vegas become higher and higher in tire wear. I think you can, start throwing Vegas maybe in the mix, but I like just kind of looking at like overall intermediate speed. We haven't had a lot of intermediate races here recently, so I think going into this week, it's like who's going to be fast. I mean, it's really tough. I mean, Michigan, we saw some cars that were really fast, that have been fast, and that was really kind of our last like intermediate. But like again, Michigan's a big track where it's lay the hammer down the whole way. So,
Yeah.
comping Darlington is really tough, and I know that's like your specialty. Really interested to hear your take, but man, Darlington is kind of its own like Darlington.
It is. It is. Now, Homestead is definitely the number one comp for
Yeah.
Darlington. Another high tire wear track. You mentioned the steep banking, similar turn radius. I know if Darlington didn't have that egg shape, it would be, what we call a true oval. And Homestead is what's called a true oval with 180-degree turns in each corner and then just two straightaways, two very straight straightaways. So Homestead is the best comp for Darlington. You see the same guys who run well at Homestead run well at Darlington, typically, your Kyle Larsons, etc. But definitely not a perfect comp. I agree with you, intermediate speed overall, but I also think you can just pull in what I call steep tracks, a little bit of Dover, a little bit of Bristol. There's kind of a driving style to having that high banking, those 180-degree turns that lends itself to a certain kind of driving style. I think that's why we see somebody maybe like a Ricky Stenhouse Jr. who can kind of do well here, does well at Bristol, etc. There's a lot of correlation. It's not perfect, right? You get a guy like Ryan Blaney who struggles at Homestead and Darlington, but is much better at Bristol. But you can still use it a little bit. So I use intermediates a little bit. I use steep tracks a little bit. But mostly I'm using Darlington itself and then some Homestead as well when I'm trying to, comp it. So definitely a tough track to cap because it is so unique. I should say at least to comp because it is so unique. But hey, that's what we have to work with. So I am expecting a very, very exciting race. But it is time to dive into some bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Darlington. That's 4 turns, 1 pick from Stevie, 1 pick from myself per turn before we drive in the victory lane. Stevie, we got to take the green flag on these playoffs here. Let's drive into turn 1. All right, what do you got for us in turn 1, Stevie?
I'm gonna go to my boy Ricky Stenhouse. I think these we have some really like tight odds across the board this week, but getting Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at a top 10 at plus 350 is nice value in my opinion. He ranked 13th in green flag speed here earlier this year. Ranked top 10 in speed at Charlotte, which is the same tire code. Doesn't really have a lot of merit, but it's the same tire code that they're running. Steep tracks are really good for Ricky Stenhouse. We see him good at Bristol. We see him good at Darlington. He finished 8th last year at Darlington. If he can avoid trouble, which is always his biggest issue, if he can avoid trouble, I think he'll have close to top 10 speed. We always see some crazy stuff happen at Darlington with tire strategy. We see guys racing for leads and running second and third and get into each other. Like, there's enough variance. I feel like if he is like a 11th to 15th place car, he has a chance for a top 10. So getting it at plus 350 seems like nice value here.
I very, very much agree with you. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., you mentioned he was 13th in green flag speed earlier this season. He was actually 12th in flags, which is, adjusting for healthy cars, adjusting for track position, things like that, to really find what I call true speed, but flags, field level adjusted green speed. So, right on the cusp of a top 10 in speed, getting him at plus 350. Really like that value there. For my turn 1 pick, I'm going to go to a guy we've talked about a bunch. I'm going to take Bubba Wallace to win his group at plus 275. That group includes him, Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, and Ty Gibbs. And Darlington has been a pretty bad track for Ryan Blaney throughout his career. And Ty Gibbs really struggles at the Darlington Homestead types. If you look not just in the Cup Series, but even in the Xfinity Series, he wasn't really killing it at this track type. If we look earlier this year at flags in the first Darlington race, almost said Daytona, Darlington race, Bubba Wallace was 6th in flags. Blaney was 10th. Joey Logano was 15th. And Ty Gibbs was 21st. Ty Gibbs was just ahead of a couple of guys. Todd Gilliland and Noah Gragson. That's not the company you want to be in when we're talking speed there. Now, this is a good track for Noah Gragson, who, of course, won't be racing this weekend. Carson Hocevar are going to be in that car. But you don't want to be in the 20s in flags going up against your pseudo teammate, your Toyota teammate, who's 6th in flags in Bubba Wallace there. So Bubba Wallace is the fastest of the 4 cars in the first race here. And 2 of these guys really struggled at this track. This is kind of a good track for Joey Logano. But even then, again, he was only around 15th in speed. He found his way up in the front few rows late in the race, ended up getting in a wreck anyway and not having as good a finish. But certainly I think Bubba Wallace, overall best intermediate flags as well. So I really like Bubba Wallace to win this group at plus 275.
Yeah, Logano, he had good speed at Auto Club, but that's really the only like big intermediate track that he's had any kind of speed. I don't think he's been top 10 in speed at any other intermediate track this season. So I like this group. I almost put this on our sheet to talk about as well. I put this on the betting page at Roto Grinders. So I'm with you on this. I am very much already on this with you. Glad that you put it on the sheet because we moved something around on the sheet for Victory Lane, and I was going to put this on there, and you had already had it, and I was like, all right, well, so. But yeah, very much interested in this.
To be fair, that was the same with Stenhouse. I saw you had it on the sheet, and I was going to put it on the sheet. So Stevie and I basically have Victory Lane in turn one already, but pretty in sync turn one. So I guess we're going to have to continue to ride the wall. Hopefully, not get a black stripe as we head into turn two. All right, Stevie, we're close to the wall in turn two. Keep us off the wall. Give us something good.
I really like this head-to-head. I don't love head-to-heads when it comes to the playoffs. They're all like minus 115 everywhere. But I like this one. It's Kyle Busch over Christopher Bell, plus 105. We talked about it last week. Bell potentially getting Gibbs's pit crew. Well, that happened. So I really do think that could potentially help Bell. They were both very similar in speed the first time we were here earlier this year. But at the end of the day, Kyle Busch was fantastic. He ran, I think he had the second best average running position. He ran in top 5 almost the whole race until they made a bad adjustment late in the race, and his car just went terrible. Like, I was listening to it back, and I was like, oh, I forgot all about that. So Kyle was like a top 3 car the whole race earlier this year. He's someone that I have an outright on already as well for this week, and I think he will have the speed here. We talked about how 2-car teams can really kind of focus on 1 car. Really like Kyle Busch over Christopher Bell. No offense to Christopher Bell. He's one of my favorites. You have Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. in your camp as well. The focus is spread out here. So like Kyle Busch over Christopher Bell at plus money.
Yeah, I agree with you. Kyle Busch earlier this year, 4th in flags. And Christopher Bell 8th in flags. And again, that includes that portion where Kyle's car just kind of went off there at the end. So even accounting for that, he was still 4 spots ahead of Christopher Bell in true speed earlier this year. For my turn 2 pick, I'm going to lean on you a little bit in the turn. Maybe you can help push me to making this a full pick. We'll have to see. But I'm going to go with Alex Bowman to win his group versus Eric Jones, Ty Gibbs, and the guy we mentioned earlier, Bubba Wallace. So that's really the tough one here is Bubba Wallace. Also, make sure to shop around because this group where Bowman is 4-1 to win this group, the exact same group, he is plus 275 to win at some books. So really shop around. If you're just line shopping, you're getting crazy value taking 4-1 versus 2.75 to 1. Now, if we look at the rest of the group, I mentioned earlier, Jones was 20th in flags. Well, Gibbs was 21st. Jones was 1 spot ahead of him in 20th in flags earlier this year. Now, Bowman did not run earlier this year at Darlington, but Bowman does have top 10 finishes in 1/3 of his Darlington starts with Hendrick Motorsports. Not a great track for him, but also not a terrible track for him by any means. So this really, if Jones and Gibbs are kind of in that middling 20s, high teens range again, because Eric Jones is the defending race winner of this race, but that Legacy Motor Club team has been slow this year overall, especially in comparison to last year. And then Ty Gibbs, not a great track for him. So if this does come down to Bubba versus Bowman, Bubba definitely should be favored and favored quite a bit, but I wouldn't say this heavily over Alex Bowman if you look at the 4-1 to win the group versus, like, let's say the 2.75 at other books. So the other nice thing I like about this bet, remember, I bet Bubba Wallace in turn 1 to win his group. But if Bubba does have a bad day, that opens the door up for Alex Bowman to win this group. So I feel like between turn 1 and turn 2, I'm going to win one of these bets. It really is like a natural plus EV hedge to Bubba Wallace. I think both bets are plus EV, and then this becomes a natural hedge to that turn one bet. You really reduce your variance that way. I think this is a way where I could lose turn one and win turn two, or I could just win turn one and then not win turn two. And hey, if things really lucky, you could win both turns one and turn two with these group bets.
Yeah, Eric Jones getting a lot of love this week. It's a great racetrack for Eric Jones. The switch coming up from Chevy to Toyota always has me kind of hesitant about Eric Jones right now. I don't feel like this team's getting hardly any support from Chevy right now. This team's ready to move on to Toyota. So I'm just worried about like Eric Jones' overall speed for the next 10 races. And I've kind of been worried about this for the last 10 races too. So, definitely don't mind Bowman over Jones. I think the hardest one is Bubba. Gibbs, he's the fourth car in. They switched to pit crews. With Noah Gragson, kind of everything that happened with Noah Gragson, like people aren't talking about it, but Ty Gibbs is locked into Rookie of the Year. He's not really racing for anything at this point outside of experience and testing stuff. So he's Rookie of the Year, and he's in a great position to go out and learn racetracks and test things that might work for him next year. Once you win Rookie of the Year, I think next year Ty Gibbs' goal with this team is going to be making the playoffs. So, I think Ty Gibbs is someone that is on that list of like, he's either going to be really good or really bad from here on out. He's just going to be testing stuff.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing he does have to run for is best of the rest. You can still get 17th in points, which I think does pay something extra by being the best of the non-playoff cars. But you're right. He's probably going to be learning a lot, testing for next year and testing for his teammates. Let's be real. So, I think I'm going to lean Bowman in this. Maybe I'll convince myself before we get into the weekend that I'll actually end up betting this. But make sure to, follow me in the Action app, check out the Action Network Discord, etc., to see if I end up making this a full pick. So those were turns 1 and 2. We have to head down to this backstretch, but before we move on to turn 3, I want to remind you that, gentlemen, first impressions matter, and if you're not taking care of your skin, it's going to be the first thing someone notices and instantly either thinks you're way older than you are or you just don't care about your appearance. Show them you do and make a great first impression with Caldera Lab. The Caldera Lab creates high-performance men's skincare products, and the regimen leads off their product lineup, a twice-a-day routine to transform your skin. The Caldera regimen is just 3 products: the clean slate, the base the clean slate, the base layer, and the good. Just like motorsports betting, where we start each week with a clean slate, the clean slate will start and end your day leaving all skin types feeling refreshed. My personal favorite, of course, is the base layer. It's your daily moisturizer, which I find extra useful to hydrate my skin and prevent myself from drying up in this dry Vegas desert heat. The good helps tighten your skin. It's packed with antioxidants. In fact, it is packed just in this little bottle with 3.4 million antioxidant units to protect your skin. By using the regimen daily, you're using product packed with nature's purest and most potent ingredients. And you know me, I'm a data guy. Data shows that 94% of men's skin showed an overall younger looking appearance after using the products just for a few weeks. Start now and you'll look younger before the end of the 2023 motorsports season. And there's more. The Caldera Lab Icon Eye Serum addresses the 3 most common concerns around the eyes. That would be fine lines, dark circles, and that old puffiness. So 1 minute in the morning and at night is all it takes to reduce wrinkles, fine lines, and signs of aging. And just for the running hot audience, we have an exclusive offer. Their best offer anywhere. Use code RUNNING at calderalab.com and get 20% off right now. That's 20% off with code RUNNING at calderalab.com. Make unforgettable first impressions that lead to the charming words, "You look younger." 20% off at calderalab.com with code RUNNING. All right, Stevie, we have 2 more turns left here at Darlington, so we're going to dive into turn 3. What do you got for us as we dive into turn 3, Stevie?
I think this is a make or break weekend for the one team, Ross Chastain. If he struggles this weekend, I think it's going to be a struggle for him the next couple weeks. I think he's going to be really solid, though. I hope so, anyway. So I'm going to take Ross Chastain top 5 plus 160. My feeling here is like Chastain's going to be fast in practice and qualifying, and it's going to move this line where I'm not going to want to jump on it, so I'm jumping on it a little early. If he struggles, I mean, I might look to other avenues of betting him as well. But I mean, Chastain, he struggled, right? But we look at his intermediate speed this year, and he's been fast at every single intermediate track outside of like one. So I really do think like this is the type of racetrack. If we just overlook how bad he was at Charlotte and just say, hey, if he struggles this weekend, maybe he's going to miss the second round of the playoffs. But he's going to Darlington. This is a great racetrack for him. He's very strong at this type of racetrack. He ranks top 5 in speed on intermediate tracks overall. And we know Ross Chastain on steep tracks, man. So hopefully him and Truex stay away from each other, and him and Kyle Larson stay away from each other. He had incidents with both of those guys earlier this year. Him and Kyle Larson were battling for the lead late in the race earlier this year, and yeah, Chastain did Chastain things. Kyle did Kyle things. I don't even know what to really kind of call it. But yeah, so whose fault it was, who knows? But yeah, Chastain had a top 3 car here earlier this year, so I'm going to go with a top 5 plus 160 here.
Yeah, not only did he have a top 3 car, I mean, he was number 1 in flags for this race last year. Better than Martin Truex Jr. in flags. But those two, I think, were the two class of the field, so to speak. Truex leading 145 laps, Ross Chastain leading 93 laps. So right there with you, it's a kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. We love Ross Chastain. He's great at these tracks, but he's been a little bit poor here. So not poor here, but poor recently. So I think this is such a good track for him. He's been great here everywhere, like Cup Series, Xfinity Series, etc. Also, if you shop around, right, you can get this at plus 160, as Stevie mentioned. I've seen this as low as minus 110. So plus 160, super value. So great find there. Stevie, for my turn 3 pick, I'm going to go to a top 10 bet, and I'm going to take the guy that needed to win to get into the playoffs, one of many, but the one that I mentioned who finished 3rd last week, Aric Almirola, top 10, 8-1. Aric Almirola earlier this year at this track, he was 17th in flags. So, kind of one of those mid-teens cars. But if you're a mid-teens car and we get the late race silliness that often happens at Darlington, that gives you a shot to finish inside the top 10. I mean, look at Harrison Burton. He finished 14th, or he's finished 6th, I should say, earlier this year. So Aric Almirola certainly can finish in the top 10 if he's hanging out in that mid-range in speed. Also, with Stewart-Haas Racing in 10 Darlington starts, he does have 2 top 10s, which of course is a 20% top 10 rate. That 20% rate, if that were his long-term average, that would equate to 4-1 as fair odds in the betting market. So we're getting 8-1. And not only has he finished in the top 10 twice, he has 2 finishes of 11th here with Stewart-Haas Racing and 1 of 12th. So he's been either inside the top 10 or on the cusp of a top 10 finish in half of his Darlington starts with Stewart-Haas Racing. Add in, like I said, a pretty solid car earlier this year. Well, where he was 17th in flags. I think 8-1 just too long for a top 10 finish.
Yeah, gosh, I hear everything you just said. I love the 8-1 thought process, and the fact that he was top 20 in flags. Anybody top 20 in speed at plus 800 is fine. I just feel like I don't know. It's not my favorite, but I like the odds. I'll leave it at that. For me, Stewart-Haas has just been down all year, so it's really hard for me to get excited about them anywhere. But I mean, this is a type of track that has high tire wear, and Stewart-Haas throughout the years has always been good at high tire wear racetracks.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just a math formula, right? Does he finish in the top 10 more than 11.1% of the time? And so, yeah, I think so. But that is the uncomfortable for me, for Stevie, for me, turn 3. But that means we have one more turn left. Time to drive into turn 4. All right, last turn here, Stevie. Give us a good one.
Well, I mean, you're definitely flirting with some black stripes here, in your turn 3 and turn 4 picks. So I'll let you get to that in just a second. But so Kevin Harvick to win this race is plus 1,800, so 18-1 to win this race. I like this for a half a unit. I don't like a full unit on this until we kind of see where he's at practice and qualifying. But if he does come out and have speed in practice and qualifying, Kevin Harvick like type of race, he's going to move from 18 to 1. So I'm jumping on this one early. He was 8th in green flag speed and finished 2nd here earlier this season. He was one of the best cars late in that race. Yeah, probably not a second place car, but he definitely had good speed at the end of that race. And Nick, we talk about it so much anytime we go to these high tire wear racetracks. I mean, this guy dominated Atlanta for years when that track was abrasive. And anytime we go to Darlington, we know Kevin Harvick's going to be in the mix. My concern with Kevin Harvick is every interview and every time I see this guy, he just seems checked out. Like if he gets knocked out of the playoffs, like he's just going to be in cruise control mode. But I think Kevin definitely has some fight left in him, and I think that this is actually a really good set of 3 tracks for him. So I think Kevin Harvick is kind of like that like sleeper Final Four pick when we look at like the tracks that are left. But I think he's going to need some help next round. But I like Kevin Harvick at 18 to 1 to get the win here.
Yeah, he will need some help next round. I think Talladega is a good spot for him to get that help. Certainly one of his best chances to win would be at a drafting track. He was in the mix this past weekend at Daytona for the win there on that last restart. Didn't work out. Obviously, he had his teammate Eric Almirola running above him high, and it just didn't quite work out there. But I guess with your feelings about my Almirola pick, I have those feelings about the Harvick pick here.
Oh yeah,
it's tough for me to get behind this guy. Like you said, he seems checked out. He was only 8th in flags earlier this year, so just not quite there in terms of like race winning speed for me at Darlington. And just doesn't seem to have the monstrous upside that he, used to have. He used to dominate races, and he just doesn't really have that upside. He's not been leading laps. So for me, I wouldn't do Harvick at 18, but I understand the thought process for sure. Definitely one of his best tracks remaining. Obviously, Phoenix, the championship race, is a great track for him, but certainly Darlington is among the better tracks remaining for Kevin Harvick. Just a very solid track for the old man here. But speaking of old man, I'm going to go to the young man for my turn 4 pick. We're going to go with young Harrison Burton for a top 10 finish at 16 to 1. 16 to 1 for a top 10 finish on Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton, I kind of alluded to him in the Eric Almirola pick, but Burton was even faster than Almirola earlier this year at Darlington. Burton was 14th in flags. And that is what led in part to his 6th place finish. He was fast and he avoided the chaos, finished 6th. I mean, we're getting a guy 16 to 1 who finished 6th earlier this year at this racetrack and was 14th in speed. It was 14th finishing position in his first Darlington race last year. And if you take his 3 Darlington finishes in the Cup Series, his average finish is 13.7. So, I mean, we're talking about a guy that is in the top half of the field on average over the last 3, his only 3 career Darlington Cup starts. Also looking down in the Xfinity Series where he came from, he finished 2nd at Darlington in his final Xfinity race at this track. He also won a race at Homestead, Darlington's most similar track in the Xfinity Series. So great track type for Harrison Burton, and he's performed well. He's backed that up in the Cup Series, 16 to 1 for a top 10.
Dad was really good here too, for what it's worth. But you look at his intermediate stats this year; they've been absolutely awful. I think he's like 28th or 29th in speed overall. One race this year, he's been top 15 in speed. It was Darlington. So I like this way more than your Eric Almirola pick. Like you sold me on this one because Harrison Burton, I feel like is young and like he's very motivated still, and the fact that like there was a report that came out that they're like switching crew chiefs. I think that's great for him. Like they pretty much said in the report that this is for this year, the end of this year and next year. So I mean, does that mean Burton's back in this car next year? That's a boost of confidence as well. So great racetrack for him. Great racetrack type for him. I don't mind this at 16. I might actually tail this.
Yeah,
this is one I don't mind.
All he has to do is do this more than 5.9% of the time, right? Those are the implied odds at 16 to 1. So as long as you think you can finish in the top 10 more than 5.9% of the time, it is definitely a good value bet. So Harrison Burton, my turn 4 pick. You mentioned something. You mentioned that crew chief switch. So him and Austin Cindric switching crew chiefs, right? Harrison Burton in that Wood Brothers Ford is kind of an affiliate of Team Penske. So they're switching crew chiefs with that Team Penske Austin Cindric team there. We also forgot to touch on Christopher Bell getting that Ty Gibbs pit crew, and then Bell's pit crew is going over to Ty Gibbs. So a change there because Ty Gibbs is out of the playoffs. Bell getting that pit crew. That's something we talked about when I took Bell 14-1 to win the championship. That has since come true. I ran some numbers yesterday, 2 days ago, something like that, showing that it is a pretty significant upgrade here. So another little boost there for Christopher Bell as well throughout these playoffs. But those returns 1 through 4, that means there is only one thing left to do at the Darlington Southern 500. Stevie, we got to take the checkered flag, we got to take the trophy, and we got to drive into victory lane. What do you got for us in victory lane, Stevie?
I mean, I think we're going to go to a guy that's found victory lane here very, very, very many times. So Denny Hamlin, plus 850 over on BetMGM. Best line that I could find on Denny as well. Plus 700 most places, 750 a couple places. So getting this at plus 850 over on BetMGM, definitely the line you want to take advantage of here. Hamlin ranks second in speed on intermediate tracks this season. He's great at managing his tires while still putting down really good laps. And he got into the wall early in the spring race and just never kind of really bounced back from it. He just had a really off race. It was a very non-Denny Hamlin type of race. So this guy's always in contention to win at the Southern 500 and at Darlington in general. So Denny Hamlin at plus 850, if he comes out and he puts down any kind of qualifying lap, which we know he will, this line's going to move closer to like what Kyle Larson is sitting at, I feel like. Larson, I think, is at 5-1. And I do think like Larson is the favorite to win, but I think Denny is really close to Larson, and we're getting, plus 350 extra for Hamlin right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I like Denny a lot as like, I kind of think even at 850, this is value this week.
Oh, yeah, I'm right there with you. I said midweek, if Denny is still plus 850 at BetMGM, he's going to be one of my picks, and I assumed you'd be on it too, so I was figuring this would be our victory lane pick. Sure enough, you had it in the outline. I was happy to see that, so this is definitely our victory lane pick. You mentioned, earlier this year, he struggled, but Denny did hit the wall in stage 1. And if we look at Denny's speed prior to hitting the wall and after hitting the wall, it's a tale of two Denny Hamlins. For the whole race, if flags is for a healthy car. So if I use the whole race and say, well, he still ran the whole race, his car was healthy enough. He comes in 16th in flags earlier this year. But if I just look to him prior to hitting the wall, he was 3rd in flags overall. If I look at healthy car speed for that portion of the race. So definitely Denny Hamlin was a contender to win this race early on in the race, got in the wall, killed his car. He even mentioned on Actions Detrimental, his podcast, that it hurt his car and ruined his race. So with a healthy car, I think he's in contention to win that race. So really like Denny Hamlin, 8.5-1 BetMGM. Definitely one of my picks this week. So that is going to do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Southern 500 episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. We'll be back this time next week to talk about bets for the Hollywood Casino 400 at Kansas. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.